listening to the Heartland Author Podcast. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, I had the opportunity to interview William Yeske. William, who served with the U.S. Army's 82nd Airborne Division, is the author of the book Damn the Valley, which is a nonfiction work about a deployment William was on in Afghanistan in the late 2000s and early 2010s. I'm here with William Yeske, who is the author of the military nonfiction book Damn the Valley. William, welcome to the Heartland Author Podcast.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Sure. So just pretty down and dirty. Name's Will. have a business out here in Harford County, Maryland, that deals with marketing, and that kind of helped out with the bookend a lot because these days it seems like having or promoting a book or, hey guys, convincing someone to read a book is can be a little bit difficult these days in the generation we live in. So it's helped out a bit being a marketer on that end. So don't worry, I didn't let it affect the the writing. The writing is true to itself in there. I know the entire story behind this book. I know, and it sort of wraps up. I know you said introduce yourself, but it sort of falls in with the entire story behind this book. Is I know it's sort of narrated by me, but it's kind of a story of everybody that was there, with everything that was included in the different pictures and stuff. So I don't think in moving forward after this thing, it's so much a me thing as an us thing. So
now, without spoiling too much of your book, Damn the Valley, what is that book about? And I understand it's about the graveyard of empires within the graveyard of empires.
You're not kidding, man. So the book Damn the Valley is really more focused. You know, it was on a deployment with the 82nd Airborne that I had back in 2009 to 2010, and only a portion of it was within the Arghandab River Valley, but that portion right there is the majority of the book, just due to how kinetic the environment was, and I mean how much combat we saw in there. There was guys that were with that had been seasoned soldiers. You know, our platoon sergeant in particular, he already had a few deployments at that point, and everybody after that thing said that there was nothing else, no other deployment in their military career compared just with the amount of instances that we had over there and the casualty rates that we experienced. I mean, you're talking a modern day combat deployment with a 52% casualty rate. That's insane.
Now, there was a related book released, I think it was last year, that you were featured in, but you were not the primary author of. What was that book called?
That was Bravo Company by Ben Kessling. It was a book that I interviewed for, and a few of the guys that were in the Arghandab interviewed for as well. One of the big issues kind of there with that book is, and I don't have a problem with that book. I honestly, I thought it was a good book. And it gets a little choppy at some points, but this one does too. You know, you have different elements from different people being talked about. And really in a book like this, when you have 125 guys out in a battlefield, you're going to get 125 different stories. And the thing here is that every single one of those stories is actually going to be true according to the perception of that person. So you're kind of limited in how many people you talk to and then the story you want to present. And really, how Mr. Kessling's book came about was it was something called Operation Resiliency that was put together to kind of help these guys out that had been in this high casualty rate area. And within Operation Resiliency, there was a reporter that was there, which was Ben Kessling. He's with the Wall Street Journal, and he was covering something on the VA capacity and sort of this pilot program that was coming out that was a peer-to-peer type program combined with VA therapists to sort of help some of these guys out through the PTSD or through any mental health issues or different life issues and stressors that they might be having. And he really saw the value in that particular event. And I mean, really, anybody that attended, myself included, anybody that attended benefited from it. It was really good to see the guys. And the whole premise behind that thing is that these guys are going to open up to the people they went to war with more than that they would with, these therapists. And they're right to a degree, though. You have to be careful because the person they're talking to, they might have been through some of the same stuff, but they're not a trained therapist. So, I mean, that's one thing to be aware of, is that in this, those guys were there to kind of assist and guide through. But Mr. Kessling was there, and they some of the guys were brought forward and talked to him and stuff, and I kind of held back. I was like, hey, some of these guys need to be talked to. There's going to be no other capacity that they're going to talk to this guy. But we kind of exchanged some information, and we ended up talking later on. And I think it was kind of just due to some of the actions on the battlefield that I ended up in the book, and that's really the only way. But where it covered a bunch of the instances that happened in the Arghandab, it was based more towards finding out a solution to veteran suicide and sort of pushing some of the merits of Operation Resiliency, which, it's an honorable thing to do, and it's definitely a good thing to bring attention to. But a lot of the guys that were there sort of felt that the premise behind that book sort of left a lot of them out and a lot of the different actions on, and it wasn't what they were personally expecting. So I think some of them were upset about that. And, I wasn't so much, because I'm like, hey, this guy's bringing light to this story and trying to make a good change within the VA. But I kind of empathized on there and thought about it myself. And I was like, you know what? Why not put down a historical account? And once I had my words down, and this was before I even saw his book, I wanted to put this together. And I wrote a 60,000 word manuscript before I saw anything from that particular book, in order so that it would be unbiased. And I contacted the author, and I was like, hey man, like, I don't want this to seem like I'm riding off your back on this, but like, what do you think my story was? And do you think that it was something that should be brought together in a book? And, he encouraged me. He was like, I like the story. I love what, everything you had to say. You just need to structure it, and you need to actually put it into something and figure out the right structure and timeline. So, and that sort of set off a lot of what happened with this book, and reaching out to a lot of the guys, and, where it's narrated from me, and I'm sort of the main speaker, it does jump forward to through the eyes of other guys, either in instances where I wasn't personally at. So one instance in particular, there was a combat scene to where a compound IED went off. So it was one IED that set off another one, and it ended up blowing up and tossing two guys over the wall to where nobody else was for about 10 minutes, 5 minutes really. It's hard to tell a timeline in a combat situation. Time kind of compresses. It's weird. It's fluid. And when you go back and then you look at like actual records, and you're like, whoa, you can kind of tell this is when it was called in, and they reached the objective, or we had people on the objective, or the helicopter was there at this time. Like that was only 15 minutes. That seemed like an hour. So, I mean, it's hard to tell exactly, but there's a portion of time to where I had no idea. I didn't have a picture of what was happening over there. So I talked to that particular person and that particular soldier, and was able to put the situation together that way, as well as a few of the other guys throughout there, because in these traumatic events, you get so many different views of the story that I've even had experiences to where someone else placed themselves doing the actions of that someone else, like another person on the battlefield, and they had no idea. They lived for years with thinking that they had done this particular thing, when in fact you talk to the person who was pulled out of the canal, or the person that was, put on the medevac bird, and you talk to them, and definitively, within a few other people as well, and they confirmed it, that, hey, no, that was this particular person that did that. And it kind of like blew their mind. They couldn't understand it. And it took me going to some VA psychologists and stuff and finding out that, in fact, like in some of these traumatic events and stuff, people, their actual mind will sync up, and they'll place themselves in that other person's actions in some of the instances and stuff. It's just wild, in some of these extreme type of instances, to see what comes forward.
Now, your book had to go through, and you're the first guest I've interviewed that had to go through this. It's a Defense Department vetting process to make sure any classified information didn't get leaked through your book somehow.
Yes.
How long did it take for the Pentagon to approve your book from the start of the vetting process to final approval?
So, in so many different things within this book, there's been really strange instances. The publisher at first, when they gave me the go-ahead and that they were going to bring this thing forward to the round robin, or the round table for consideration, for one, like I said, it was an unfinished 60,000 word unfinished manuscript, and I threw it out there thinking that this was something that I needed to self-publish. No one would ever pick this up. I'm not a writer. This will end up being something on the self-publishing, but if I don't hold myself to that standard, how else is this going to move forward? So it sort of wrapped up into I pushed that out to the publisher, and when I heard that back, I was like, okay, if I'm going to make this happen in a year, I need to start the DoD process. So I immediately got on it, sent some stuff out, even though, I had been in touch with my old commander, and he's like, I don't know how much was unclassified, how much was actually classified. I don't think you have much to worry about. And I was like, I'm going to put it out anyway. And got word back. I want to say 3 months went by, and I kind of checked up with him. And the guy came back and was like, oh, yeah, it's crazy that you just mentioned me. I just, mentioned this to me. I just read it the other day, and this is going forward to, the person that we contract out on this side to, the black line guy, So it goes through one personnel first as prior, and then it goes forward to like a case manager, to where they go through and they have access to the red side and they're looking at everything. So that came back within 2 weeks after that. And then from there it was shoot them manuscript updates. And I kind of wondered too, because the publisher was like, this is unheard of, 3 months. Like, this just doesn't happen. And I said something to the guy, and I said, hey, this isn't the publisher said this, and this came back to me, and they're right. 3 months does seem pretty short. What's your background? He's like, well, I'm former infantry. Okay, so you did this job. He's like, yeah, this book really resonated with me, so I sort of fast tracked it. So we ended up getting really fortunate in quite a few ways, but that way especially is that we had somebody at the DoD looking out for us. And not too far after that came back, we actually had that Air Force kid that was on Discord pop up saying, hey, this guy's going to jail for leaking classified information. And I was like, I am so glad that I went through this process. But it further pushed forward the mission of making this a nonfiction book, and it solidified the legitimacy behind it. And with that DoD copy back, I did have some black lines coming back, and it was really unit identifiers and some of the secret squirrel operation type stuff that was happening, and it was like, hey, this you can talk about this stuff, but we have to redact some of the models of helicopters, and we have to redact some numbers and stuff that you have here because it can be used as unit identifiers. I'm like, okay, so not anything that really hampered the story too much.
Now, there's on Veterans Day, there's going to be a launch event for your book in Fayetteville, North Carolina at the Airborne and Special Operations Museum. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yeah, that was.
Is that open to the public or is it invitation only?
So there is another invitation-only event happening, but this one in particular is for the public. It's on Veterans Day. You guys can come down to the Airborne and Special Operations Museum. I'll be speaking there. But really, that whole end of things came down off of the cover of the book. So you have on the cover of the book, it's a flag shown getting pulled out of what appears to be, some rocks, some rubble and stuff. And what had happened there was a vehicle IED that the enemy drove up and exploded and flattened the compound that the guys were staying in at the time, the guys of 2nd Platoon. And, there was people buried alive. I mean, it was just a horrific instance. And after everybody was recovered, and no U.S. person, I mean, people were banged up pretty good, but no U.S. personnel ended up killed in that one. There was a few Afghan children, unfortunately. But as they're kind of recovering stuff, and the medevac birds and stuff are coming in and out, the guys found the flag as they're digging through the rubble, and there was a group of 3 of them that were kind of the search party, and they started on unearthing it. And one of them, Sergeant Rodney Garcia, grabbed the camera off of the hip of one of the guys and snapped that particular picture. And I kind of felt that was really a good depiction of the guy's attitudes, towards the whole thing. Like, hey, you can knock us down, you can beat us up, you can even make us bleed, but we're here and we're here to stay. Good luck trying to move us. And the whole thing, and I know this is kind of coming around long circle, but the whole thing was when I chose that cover picture and one of the guys saw it, he contacted me. It was Brian Erickson. And he contacted me and said, hey, that I have that flag. And it kind of blew me away. I was like, what do you mean you have the flag? And he's like, I took the flag with us. I recovered it from the compound when we left, and when that other unit took over, I took the flag with us, and I have it. I was like, oh my God, are you kidding me? And he asked me, if there's anything that he could use it for to help the book effort. I was like, well, let's see if maybe we can get it down into the unit's display case or something. And it ultimately ended up down at the museum for the fact that we have a dedicated, paver brick. As you enter the museum, there's a bunch of paver bricks down there. And the unit paid for one of those pavers that has the names of the guys that were killed in action on that particular deployment. So it's almost like the flag came home. And with that, as well as there's actually going to be quite a few artifacts that were donated from the different guys that were there, as well as myself, that are included within the stories of this particular book. And it's all going to be down there at the Airborne and Special Operations Museum on Veterans Day. Kind of for you guys to almost give it a tactile feel and to really solidify this book in its nonfiction status that, hey guys, look, this stuff happened, and it's presented in a very real way. I tried to make this book read in a stream of consciousness that was, like a memoir type, but in a way to where you don't get normally. Normally you get these books from generals or colonels and stuff much longer after the fact, and a lot of them haven't even been, they're writing these things from either battlefield reports or something from times past that happened with other guys. They were just in command of whatever situation, so they were kind of removed from what was actually happening. This is an on the battlefield picture from the enlisted guys, the lower enlisted guys. So I mean, your privates and specialists and some of the sergeants and squad leaders. That's what the view from this book is from the actual ground, and you don't get this type of view from the type of nonfiction military books that you get these days.
Now, do you suffer from PTSD or any other emotional trauma, such as survivor's guilt from the casualties sustained during your deployment?
You know, I'm in touch with, I have a good team over the VA, and I always try to constantly be self-evaluating myself, because I know that a lot of us do struggle with that, in fact. And in writing this thing, I didn't really think so much that I did, because I was always like, hey, I have no problem talking about it. I've never had an issue opening up about things. And sort of in writing this thing and really getting down in the weeds of it, there was things I've forgotten. There was some chapters that I wrote with tears streaming down my face, and sort of realizing that, in fact, there was some stuff that affected me in there. Now, maybe not to the extent of some of the other guys. Everybody's different, and everybody's different in what affects them. I know for me, a lot of it ends up being in any of the instances that involve children. And maybe that's because I have two of my own now, and that like really pulls on my heartstrings. But, this stuff in going forward, it shapes everybody. It's going to affect you in one way or another, no matter what, but it's really in how you use it and how you move forward. And you kind of pick and choose what you dwell on. And that was one of the things that with this book, I did want to make sure that, some of the guys that read it and everything weren't negatively affected. And that's actually one of the purposes in this book, is like, hey, it's okay to talk about these traumas and these traumatic events. It's not just you that they happen to. And there is a way forward, and if anything, the proof that if someone like me that's been through this and everything can make it through, and talk about it and put forward a story and be putting it out at this level, you have more in store for you in your life as well. There's just, you have to put the right people around you, and you have to look at it maybe a little differently instead of being broken. I've heard a lot of people say that these things break us, and I don't think that that's exactly the case. I think that it's more, these things might affect you and they might tear you up a bit, but doesn't the same thing happen when you're forging a metal? You don't see that end when it's in the fire or when it's getting pounded out on the anvil, maybe like maybe a knife blade or something. But at the end of things is when it's gone through the process, the end result is something that's sharpened and honed and, really can be used for something and has a purpose in life.
Now, how has your experience been transitioning from military life to civilian life? And as I understand it, you're a student at Columbia Business School?
Yes. I actually just finished up everything over there. It was, so that was through the executive program, but it had to do with a CMO program that they had. That it's an extended certificate program that ends up giving you enough graduate credits to be able to obtain like a Columbia alumni status. But that actually just finished up, and that was actually something that I wanted to really, it's been that push, hey, if I can do this stuff in the military and stuff, you see so many guys, like once they leave the military, you hear awful stories or horror stories of these guys transitioning out of the military, and that they end up either searching for a purpose or, this is one of the reasons why veteran suicide is so high. And it's like, push yourself, go to these, apply to these Ivy League programs at these schools and put yourself out there. I know one of the things that was asked is, you just asked it right here, how's your transition experience been? Well, leaving the military was interesting. They didn't really leave me with too much other than some very poorly done resume classes in a program where the military has. It's called the TAPS program, Transition Assistance Program. And the resources there are great, but I feel like a lot of the people either don't utilize them, or they aren't presented in a way that resonates with the people they're being presented to. They just don't understand it. They don't understand that if the information isn't being translated correctly to them. And I think that really, if we put this stuff into frameworks for these guys, sort of much on how we did in the military, you kind of dumb everything down. They have something, the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid. If you do that and put these things into an easier to understand framework for these guys, things would be a different story in coming out. And that's actually been sort of what is turned into the follow-on to this particular project, is focusing on getting some of these guys either help through some of the organizations that I've talked through, or showing them that, like, hey, this is possible. You're a smart person. Like, you have something else to add out there. Let me help show you the way, or let me put you in touch with somebody, or let me share some of these frameworks of my own that I've made along the way.
William, you were an amazing guest for this podcast, and I thank you for appearing on the Heartland Author Podcast.
Oh, no, it was great to be here. I absolutely enjoyed it. I look forward to talking to you in the future.
I will note that the interview in this episode was recorded prior to Hamas's terrorist attack on the music festival in Israel and the currently ongoing Israel-Hamas war, so current events are not reflected in this interview. William was a wonderful guest, and I look forward to reading Damn the Valley. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to write your imagination. Bye for now. You can learn more about me and my book writing projects at campaaronapollo.wixsite.com/authoraac. You can follow me on Facebook at AuthorAAC and on Instagram at AACscribe. Copyright 2023, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.